Guys, it's definitely been an interesting day for all of us who are working on this show because every couple of moments we're just like, oh, I think this is the pool. Are we going to go live? I think this is the pool. And I think as much as it's interesting for us, it's got to be just such a crazy day for them. I was joking around when we actually got on and we were all talking to each other with Preach and Bay. And I was like, I think I went to sleep like 12 hours ago. It was like 6 a.m. my time. I was falling asleep and they had a 2% pull. And I was like, do I even go to sleep? I think maybe we were about to go live and actually celebrate the fact that this is over. Then I got a full sleep in and they're still in about the same place. And Preach, I think one of the things to kind of note upon is it's not very often that we see progression get this close to getting it down on so many attempts. You bring up certain bosses like maybe Gahoon, right? Where you get a bunch of those 1%. This doesn't happen very often. What's going on in your mind? Why are we getting so many pulls that are so close to being kills?
It's a combination of a couple of things. One, to get to that point is so hard in the first place that you're looking at like 1 in every 10 or 12 pulls that's actually reaching this point where you can even say you're at lower 10%, right? We actually haven't seen it for a while now, getting them below 10%. So those are like the best, everything's kind of gone right pulls to just get there. And on top of that, it's so crushing to the raid to be in that position that they are getting mauled to death. And they've had to pull out all the stops to even be surviving as long as we've seen them get there. They've had to basically turn the warlocks into healers so that the healers could just focus on the raid. So because we have this leech debuff going out, they've put the Affliction Warlocks in there and they're sucking in health themselves, which is then healing the guys with the leech debuffs, turning them into the raid healers, essentially, as this debuff mounts up. And all this combined with the utterly chaotic and hectic movement and overlaps that's happening at this point, it's unbelievable to me that the guys have kept their heads this long. We did see a 4% wipe, and I brought it up before. It's the 2% wipe. They were all like, we've got this. That was like the inspiration. That was the adrenaline rush. We've got this. The 4% one, though, salt pouring from the sky. The guys needed a break. They were like, give me a minute.
Yeah.
Everything was good.
It's understandable. And Bay, I think the other really big important point that we should touch upon is something that you've brought up quite a few times to us before we even did go live. And that's the idea of how many pulls this really is. And the fact that, you don't get a 700 pull boss very often.
We are, so I'm trying to we guys get some commands confirmed here. I was just talking to Kana over in his chat. I'm apologizing for the fact that he brought the stream live and they got started about 10% and they wiped. So it's obviously our fault that the show started and they wiped. I apologized. But we are, because his weak aura says 650 plus wipes, please die squid or whatever. So I don't know what we're actually at specifically. So we are going to get some updates for that soon. Chat saying they're at over 700 now.
This is I called it, man. This is the hardest boss ever made. I'm telling you.
That's so cool. But like, okay, let's say it's the hardest boss ever made. Let's just say that that's a fact, just for the sake of this conversation for a moment here.
Sure.
If this is the hardest boss actually made, it's hard for all of the right reasons. Like, you're hearing all of the people who are progressing on it saying like, no, I love this boss. It is a challenge. It's actually a challenge. It's not just a ridiculous overlap. It's not one of those things where certain pulls are just invalidated because it becomes impossible due to the way the fight's structured. It is just a well-made, well-tuned boss. And how exciting is that, especially in an expansion where, a lot of people have had fair criticisms of multiple things of the game. A lot of people have definitely complained with different things in BFA, but then you look at this on a tier that isn't even a tier, right? Like, a lot of people won't even say that this is a tier. It's just a 2-boss raid, and it has one of the best fights we've ever seen in raiding history.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because this is so unique. We're not going to see something like this, certainly for the rest of the expansion, maybe not next expansion. This situation Blizzard has created here is extremely unique, which is why we're having this situation. This is why we're able to look at a boss that has been designed this way. And whether or not it'll happen again in the next 12 months or 18 months is pretty slim, honestly, that they'll be able to put something together that's like this and know confidently they're okay to do that. It's not going to screw anybody else up, really.
Yeah.
And that's the big benefit that Blizzard's ran with this time, is to really throw everything they can at the wall. And so much of uu'nat that makes this fight so difficult. Every aspect of the fight is designed to prevent them doing anything that would ordinarily be considered like cheese. So, like, similar to the last phase is obviously the hardest. It's the longest part of the fight as well. You look at what happened just with Jaina. Is the guys sat down, they did the math, and they were like, we can just Zerg Jaina. Like this, we don't have to deal with the elemental, the 2 elementals that come after it, or anything like that. In fact, we could probably just survive and then go for the kill. That's not what Blizzard intends. They don't like that, but they have to design it around a whole bunch of guilds getting to there. You know what I mean? They can't design it around the methods and the limits and the pieces. They can't do that. This time around, though, they absolutely can. They absolutely can. And that's why they've been able to say, okay, we're not going to let you do that. There is no way in hell you're going to burn this thing down in the last phase before it gets really, really hard. You're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. And looking at them, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but watching them do this last phase is so complex that it's like that guy from the Oceans franchise when he's diving through the lasers in the museum to get the Clooney or whatever. No, not Clooney. I can't remember what the guy's called, but he's the other thief. And he's got to do backflips and rolls, and he's under pressure, and he's got to do all this stuff in such a smooth, like graceful manner while it's incredibly complex. And that's what it looks like to me. You can see them ducking into little alcoves and moving out to spread, then moving back into a certain position, then baiting things out. They're all flowing like a river around the fight, still having to put out the best DPS they could possibly do.
It's just good wow. It's straight up just good wow. I think that's like the most important thing to note about it. It really is that moment where you're playing the music and also doing the dance to that music. And it's so incredible to watch. And then you take it to the next level. And this was something that you said before we even went live. It was every percent is like 30 seconds, 45 seconds long. So you're just dealing with all of it. It takes such it's an arduous thing to have to go through. And I want to go back to something that you said, Preach, because Max basically said something about this last night when he was talking about Jaina. It's that idea. They look at the fight and they go, okay, this is how Blizzard wants us to beat it. Like these top guilds have that sense of, okay, this is how Blizzard wants us to beat it. What can we get away with? And I really do feel like this is one of the first fights where that isn't the case, where you can get away with as much, because Max is talking about like, okay, we looked at the ice blocks. This is how we tried to get away with it the first time. That didn't quite work. So then we go for the Zerg strat. It's always about getting away with something when you don't have that gear. And I think this time around, because the gear isn't there, they can go for a design like this. And Bay, I want to know, do you think that designing a boss in this sense can happen outside of a 2-boss raid that doesn't necessarily give you that weekly character progression of increasing your item level and gear?
I think that because the only thing the 2 instances that come to mind that are similar to this current situation is obviously the Odin, Guarm, Helia, the little 3-boss mini raid that we had in Legion. But that was like, Helia was great, but Helia didn't have this crazy numerical wall. Helia also had all these weird exploits. You're saying that what I can get away with. There were bans due to strats that people chose to use on Mythic Helia that obviously, sent a wave through the community a little bit there about like, oh, oops. And then there's Halion back in the end of Wrath of the Lich King going into Cataclysm. But the game was so different back then too. Halion didn't ever stand a chance like this. And the way the game's tuning is now, and I think what they've learned from, well, okay, this kind of like 1-2 boss mini raid is fun, sure. They tried it again with Helia, 3 boss mini raid between tiers. All right, but like there wasn't a huge like gear jump or requirement. Guarm had like an artifact level everyone had to reach, right? Some numerical thing. But then Helia was just a mathematics skill check that the mathematic was kind of like, okay, now after their 3rd iteration of this kind of a raid, which is the Crucible of Storms and uu'nat, the Harbinger of the Void, this is now sort of the culmination of those 3 raids. And it's wild to see that they not only have the Thogar-esque checklist of abilities, that they have nerfed and wiggle roomed for more guilds to actually like, okay, this now works here, this is not overlapping there as extreme, so now you still have to play around all of this. The numbers are ridiculous. We've gone over the numbers a couple times before, that basically once phase 3 starts, they are doing all of Grong's HP without the free like 30% you get from the cores, all with just the actual encounter itself. That's actually once you get there, another boss fight worth of HP. And watching one of their best pulls today, and I believe on the monitor all day today, like you did when you opened the show, we're talking about it. is even getting down to like the last, I think I put in chat, like the last 6 or 8%, the last combination of abilities that I saw, the new ad spawns, they have to do the Tempest Crown to kill off 3 ads, they have to do it before a swath of lasers come through at the same time that uu'nat is doing the call to N'Zoth that AoEs the whole raid, and then mind controls everybody. There's so much happening there, and the boss still has 20 million HP.
It's why we see a low percentage like 10% and think they're almost there. They're not.
They're not.
Got so long to go.
Yeah,
They have so long to go.
But that's why the copy pasta started. It's like, I don't know if you guys have seen this copy pasta, but it's just like, it's in quotes, boss dies today, Josh 2019 0430. Feels good, man. Boss dies today. And it's just like spamming that over and over again. But then it's like, it just keeps going back. Like, how many days have these guys thought that the boss does end today before any nerfs or anything like that started to come out? Typically, when you get a sub 10% pull or something like that, yeah, the boss does die that day, or you're at least close. This time around, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, maybe not. The 2%, I think, gave them the knowledge they can do it. I don't think if they would have had that wipe, they would still be here right now. It's like you say, it is like when I say it's unique and we compare it to small raid tiers. If you think about Hellier, it followed a ridiculously easy raid in the nature of Emerald Nightmare. So a huge amount of guilds were piling into TOV, which makes it. This is not that scenario. This is why I'm saying how this situation is extremely unique. Is Halion was made as, I think if you remember, it was made as like a quick sort of like the expansion was going on too long without anything happening. It was as simple as that. I think we were at a year already before when the last content came out, and they were just like, okay, we've made Halion. There you go. Yeah, and it died in the same day as well, if you remember. Because again, they expected a ton of guilds to be in there. It wasn't a case of we're gonna, this is gonna be something that runs for a while. Whereas this is something else. And I also want to bring up the questions when this does die. Do you think they're going to farm this? Because I don't.
Oh, no, not at all.
I mean,
well, okay. So actually, Max said something kind of interesting last night, which made me think otherwise. Max was like, "Yeah, we're gonna do a reset and we're gonna take down Cabal because we need that gear for the new raid in 8.2."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Wait, really? You actually need this stuff?" I didn't think anyone was really going to use it. I actually forgot to ask him while I was on the show, like what they were targeting, because they're definitely targeting something, right? Like there's something that they want to get them. I'm sure there's definitely a purpose to it, but that did surprise me because it made it seem like they are going to at least kill Cabal every week until they get everything that they need headed into 8.2.
It could be something like Sliver, because I know when I was raiding on Thursday, we said we should make a new rule that if there's a trinket that no one really likes, but it has some sort of obscure nature like Sliver, we should farm them from the get-go and make sure everybody has them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably following the same rule set, because my guild was in a situation where some of us had Slivers, including myself, but they were like the normal mode one. And when it had dropped on Mythic, pass, don't want it, because I just hate that trinket. So imagine being in a scenario where we're forcing everybody in the raid to have one, so it makes sense, right? It's that kind of mindset that we were into, where it was like, well, this makes no sense in a raid environment because it's not the best for everybody, right? And then we were like, okay, now we need to go back and do mythic splits, which is what we ended up doing to go and get more slivers for people that had probably already had them in the past or could have coined them or something like that ages ago. So they might be doing something similar, which is like, this thing's kind of unique. Let's make sure everybody's got one. You never know.
Well, so some people in the chat are saying Limit did end up extending last night. I didn't actually get to watch their raid last night.
That's rare for them, isn't
it? Well, I feel like even just hearing Max say it means they will eventually farm Cabal, right? Once the race is done, they'll have a little bit of time headed into 8.2. Just the thought that there is gear in there that they may need was interesting to me, because when I look at this tier, I think one of the other things that's interesting about it is obviously the way the rewards are structured is different than what we've seen in BFA and overall more interesting, but there also isn't a large enough power increase that seems like most classes and specializations are really going to be going after that gear in the current iteration.
Yeah, that's the weird part. I can bring up the loot table real quick. We're looking at here with uu'nat, and we already know the Void Stone is huge. Right? The Void Stone is a big deal. And there are a few specs that actually make, I'm looking at the database. This is weird. The eye levels are a little bit awkward. They should be 425, not 350. That's strange.
Yeah.
But that's why I was trying to look at this. But
I
scale
think
eye
you
level.
can scale it. Yeah,
Well, it's scaled. This is strange. I should have looked at this before I swapped over. But regardless, I was looking at the things that might you want to farm for, right? The Lurker's Insidious Gift is actually pretty huge for a certain number of specs. Some of the other pieces are all right, but I can't think of much else that isn't just the Void Stone and the Agility or Strength DPS trinket that are what you're going to want to farm.
Yeah, I feel like you're saying with Voidstone, like I look at Voidstone, I go, oh, this could break a few boss fights, right? Like maybe you get into a scenario where people can really use that to get past certain mechanics. I almost think of it as it's like kind of like a Baby Darkness, right?
Well, so the Voidstone is a single target that you enshroud in the absorb. The Voidstone is actually very pinnacle for all your healers, having it for the for Cabal itself, because again, you could Voidstone someone with another absorb on, and they can stay at 9 stacks of the Promise of Power. So there's already a fight that you can use it on a hard difficulty from take this from heroic and use it on mythic, but there's a couple of those that I'm not sure. So farming this boss though specifically, obviously uu'nat drops 425 loot, which is the highest you can get in the game right now. We don't really know if we're going to see or what kind of a bump we're going to see with the Ajara's Eternal Palace coming out. We don't know if it's going to be like a total. Does heroic start at 440, which means that any of this 425 loot is like, right? You don't need it, or is 425 going to go essentially right into heroic? So you're already at a baseline, so you're essentially gearing right now. And when heroic Ajara's Eternal Palace comes out for mythic Ajara, that's we don't know how the island.
Excuse my ignorance with this too. When is testing for Ajara? Do we know yet?
Don't know yet.
Not been announced yet.
Oh, okay.
They're still they're doing the PTR extremely slowly. Like I spoke to Blizzard about it today, and it was like it's going so slow. They're like,
I feel like this is a PTR. I feel like this is a PTR where they're like, yeah, we actually want to make sure we're getting a lot of feedback, which I think is a good thing. I feel like they're very much in a lot of the times, how you have that feeling where it's like, yeah, we can give feedback, but it's already so far done. How much of a bump or a push in any direction can it make? This time around, I feel like they're like, please, we're going to change stuff because we want to make sure that we're giving you a game that you want to play. I feel like they're trying to, I feel like, and not to go too far off the rails away from the raid right now, but I do feel like with 8.2, they're not necessarily trying to move away from BFA, which I feel like they will in the next expansion. Like, I feel like they're going to dumpster pretty much everything that was in BFA, but I feel like they're basically like, instead of giving you, and Preach, this was something that you said with me that really did resonate. Instead of taking those systems and dumpstering them, which they inevitably will, or introducing any new systems that people may like that they would carry over to the next expansion, instead it's like, yo, let's break out the duct tape and let's just patch up as many of these holes as possible. Instead of creating new systems, let's try to work with the systems that we have, and then we can throw them away at the end. Let's just make them passable for now. It's really, I'm thinking of I don't know if you guys have this infomercial, but it's like that infomercial where they're like, if there's a hole in your boat, spray it with blah blah blah, and then they like spray that crap on it.
That's a jump drop video.
Yeah. That's where we're at right now. It's like all my problems with BFA, slap it on.
Oh, I can't remember what it's called, but it's just slap it on. Flex tape. Yeah, flex tape.
There it is.
Yeah.
I feel like 8.2 is just like, how much flex tape can we throw on this? Which, to a certain degree, is fine, right? Like I think we talked about essences a lot yesterday, and Preach, I know you and I talked about essences.
I want to watch that show, actually. I'm sad I missed it, because I wasn't here, because I thought it was the PvP show. And then they was like, can you come? I'm like, I've made plans now.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. And we started to go into the essences quite a bit and really talking about them. And I think everybody's take on it was, we had a lot of different takes, but a lot of them were kind of talking to the same issues and different solutions to those issues, whether they were excited for the system or not excited for the system. 8.2 is going to be cool. It's going to be interesting one way or the other. And
they have nerfed some of the essences today, like which isn't surprising. It was the feedback was, yeah, they're going to be rebalanced and stuff like that. But coming back to what your point is, though, is with 8.2 and how raids like this affect it with these unique items. It's like we're talking about the item level, but if this raid is special in a different way than the boss designs, the items are super interestingly unique, right? They're very, very niche items. And that means that item level might not be that big of a factor. If it's still a case that the low item level one does crazy absorbs and there's nothing in the new raid even like that, then it might not even matter that it's a 425 version or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And that might be exactly what they're thinking there, is that it doesn't matter. These items are super unique. They're super interesting. We're not going to find them anywhere else unless they really, which is what I hope, is they're using Crucible as like, do people like having kind of niche, unique items? Then in the Rise of Ashara, let's throw a lot more of that in there and let's see what we can do and let's have some more fun items in the game. And if that is the way they're going, that would be great. If they don't go that way, then now they've got access to a very decently high level amount of very special, unique items, which could come into being a big factor in the Eternal Palace. Which, play it safe, farm it, right?
I don't mean this in a negative way. And Bay, I want to hear kind of what you think of this. I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean it in a positive way. And I think it's people may hear this and try to take it in a negative way. But when I look at 8.2, I think it's like really clear now that Blizzard has a sense of these are some of the problems in the game, but particularly with rewards. I think that they have a pretty good sense of what the problems are. And I look at 8.2 and I go, even if 8.2 fails and the systems in 8.2 are not great, does that stink? Yeah, it stinks because then 8.2 is not going to be as fun as it could be. But I think that it will show them so much that the future of gearing, particularly maybe when we get to the next expansion, maybe when we get to the next tier, whenever it is, I feel like they'll have so much information on what people do what from gear, kind of how what Preach is saying with different ideas of like, do people want these unique pieces of gear that aren't completely dependent on item level? What are people looking for? What are people enjoying grinding for? And then you also have the other reward systems that are going on, particularly with the daily hubs, with the 2 islands where you're like building your own trinket, you're building your own ring. Then you have those island style catch up mechanics. I just feel like 8.2 is going to give them so much data that whether or not 8.2 is a success, I cannot see the patch after that not having just huge improvements to rewards.
The reward structure has always been a weird one. So I don't know. I didn't take anything you're going on about there as a negative one. And this is sort of where I have butted heads back and forth about how I actually really like a lot of what they have going on with the Essence system, which is funny. Not to keep going on about the Crucible of Flame, the Essence that Mike talked about in his video. They talked about, I would say, in a bit of a poor light, which I had a huge book of text that I posted on his comment section to like clarify some things. Well, it's funny. It's funny. It might be boring, but it got nerfed because it was that potentially strong, or at least internally or externally. The weird part about that is that some of those abilities, and they did fix the GCD problem. That was actually a buff to all of them today. They fixed the haste scaling of the GCD of the essences across the board on the PTR now. So they're not all locked at 1.5 without haste scaling. They'll be 1 second or 1.5 with haste scaling. So that's nice. But there are certain, they are totally going to be, and we can sort of theorize this now, but we're never going to know until everyone has the ice in their hands and some random, I don't know, Korean rogue pops up with this combination of Azerite abilities and this essence and these miners, and all of a sudden just breaks the game wide open, and Blizzard either responds or doesn't respond, or the rest of the community finds out about it and makes videos about it and posts about it in Discord and goes on Twitter, and it just wrecks something, right? Subtlety Rogue, highest single target DPS in the game, right? Because essentially the Essence system is a bit of a sandbox. We already have fine-tuned the Azerite system to a degree. We know how that works. We're looking
really good right now, babe. Not to cut you off, but we're at 40%, and at least like everybody's alive pretty much.
Oh, I have it right here. Yeah, I have it right here. To get back to we're at 10%. Everyone's alive. Yeah, we'll definitely.
Never mind. Miraz has died. It's over.
Oh, did he? No, he didn't. He's alive. Wait.
Is he getting rest?
Oh no! Wait. No, he is dead. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have said anything.
Jinx.
Kill the boss.
Jinx. Caster curse.
This is why I'm not talking about the boss fight.
Caster curse, man. Big Jinx, big yikes.
Kill the man! Kill him!
Blame
Kill the
preach.
man.
Blame preach. I do want to. I just saw this. This is kind of an aside. I just want to mention it so everybody knows everything going on in WoW right now. I actually think that this is pretty cool. GCD TV announced like 4 hours ago. I just saw it for some reason.
Mhm.
They announced that they're doing 6v6 RBG tournaments. That's actually pretty cool. So now RBG tournaments are going to be in the ecosystem. That hasn't happened in a really long time. I'm actually excited for that. I'm pretty excited for that. That's small aside. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Hey.
And now we can go back to jinxing them when they get pulls in.
Yeah. Well, no, this is why I was. Yeah, it's all your fault, Mike.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
I'm so angry.
When I was going to go off with the essence system while the guys wipe and reset right now, Mike's fault, is that there are certain parts of the system that we have figured out, right? Like we can figure out stat weights. We have that. We have figured out all the smart people that do all the math and theory crafting stuff. We all have the Azerite traits and stacking them, and everyone gets them all essentially for free in the patch, right? All the Azerite stuff will be always unlocked. You can pick and choose everywhere combinations, put them wherever you want, do whatever you want. You know, collect the whole set. And the next sandbox element that comes into play here is the essences, major and minor. What do you major, and then what do you stack in the minors? And then what opens up when you have all three minors down the road some ways, I would imagine, because there's going to be unobtainable amounts of AP, like billions, and we can't even get it, so there's no point in getting past a certain level. But there's going to be certain combinations that come up here soon that will change either lower performing specs or again bolster the higher performing specs. We don't know. The new demonology, as Rich has talked about on the show a couple of times already, the new demonology, if you haven't seen it's the cooldown reduction one with demonology, we get like 3 or 4 infernals up. That's totally fine. So the potential for breaking the game wide open is definitely there in a way, and I think Blizzard is just going to let that happen, and they want that to happen. And the DPS jump we're going to see is going to be a little stupid, probably like 30 or 40% of what we're doing right now. Absolutely nutty, because essentially we're soft resetting the game. The gear catch up in mechanics in 8.2, in Najatar, and in Mechagon, where you can essentially build and farm up and upgrade up your entire set of gear to get caught up like you're a brand new character. It's a good halfway reset point, right? And almost like
it's needed.
It's needed, sure. But it also makes sense, like, even like a narrative sense with how they've made the expansion. We had like the Horde versus Alliance crap, but then all of a sudden with uu'nat now, this Squid Boy and N'Zoth and the rupture coming with the Black Empire and the Old God stuff, it almost feels like we're getting a mini expansion launch, not only story-wise, but also system-wise in the game. And I think that's fine. They're sort of whiteboarding and erasing it all and say, like, let's start over, in a way.
No. Why do you have poop in your mouth? Oh, my God.
I hear that every day.
That was like a weird allegory for the Azerites, as my dog just can't. He's like, I heard what Bay said. Here's some poop. I'm like, oh no. Like, it's just, my dog hates Azerite. But Bay, I actually need to ask you something. No, he gets triggered by Azerite. I have so I want to ask Bay something, because this was actually something I was confused about, and Bay knows more about it than I do. Everybody's like, good dog. But you said one thing about basically like we're going to be able to make sure that we have our perfect combinations of Azerite. How is that going to work? Because I know initially when I heard kind of the new stuff was coming out in 8.2, I was like, oh, all of that's going to be thrown on the neck. And I think the example that I used yesterday was I kind of imagined the neck was going to look like an Azerite piece of gear. The essence, we were going to basically be choosing that instead of where, if you think of an Azerite piece of gear where you get the +5 item levels, I imagined that being the essence. And then every other ring you were selecting like you were picking Azerite gear, but you were just getting the effect of selecting that for every piece. Like if it was 3 stacked, you know what I mean? I thought that was what they were doing with Azerite gear, and I thought they were getting rid of the pieces altogether. What are they actually doing to enable us to select the Azerite pieces that we want? Because that's something on PTR I didn't even see.
So I'll bring up there's a huge thread on Wowhead, the Heart of Azeroth overview that you can go over and look at. The best thing, and this is what Mike and I agree on wholeheartedly, every single essence for the Heart of Azeroth is a targetable, do this to get this, period.
It tells you if you mouse over it. If you're missing, if there's like, I want this one, it literally tells you where you go and get it.
That I agree is very good. That is very good. Oh, don't lick me.
Well, you might not, depending on what it is. Like if the one's best for PvE and you hate PvP, the one you might want comes from like rated battlegrounds or something.
I don't care about that nearly as much. I like the idea.
I don't mind. I'm just saying some people will like, I just don't ever want a PvP. Why is my best one?
Remember in I guess it was Mr. Pandaria, there was like the one part where it was like, win this battleground. And people were like, oh no. But it's like, yo, win a fucking battleground. Grow the heck up. Like, yeah, it's not exactly how you want to play the game, but maybe you'll end up having fun doing it. And if you don't, you know what? No big deal. It's not that big of a deal. And I always look back to BC, right, and how many different scenarios I felt like I wanted a reward. So I played a different style of the game that I didn't normally want to play. And all of a sudden that became one of my favorite things. Like there was a long period in the game where I loved PvPing all of the time. That's one of the reasons I have the job that I have now today. And I never looked at the game and said, oh, this is what I want to do necessarily with any aspect of the game. But I fell into it as I did try it. And then I played it more and more and more. And I feel like the game doesn't ever put you outside of your comfort zone right now.
No, I mean, actually, what you're talking about was the actual design intention of artifact power. That's exactly what it was supposed to do. It was giving you the whole purpose of artifact power originally was to inspire you to maybe go and do things that you might not ordinarily do and still be rewarded for them. So if your friend comes along and is like, hey, do you want to do a BG? I don't like BGs. Well, you'll still get some AP, maybe a Lego. You know, there's still benefits to doing that. And if you don't, you can go and do the thing you really enjoy and still get benefits from it. Which is a shame that they removed that for some unknown reason in BFA.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that the thing was it did kind of end up falling on its face, right? Because it wasn't powerful enough. And
artifact power?
Yeah, it wasn't like a powerful enough incentive. I think one of the things that was really cool when you look back to, you know, BC, for example, just because that was that was where I started, kind of this example. I think of, you know, shoulders, for example, like the shoulders that you would actually buy from the PvP vendor. And you looked at them and you're like, these are really strong. And I want these even for PvE. Were they necessarily your best in slot? No, but if you weren't currently raiding, like it was a big enough power gain. So you felt the urge to do it and it felt very powerful, even if it wasn't necessarily best in slot. It was this nice stepping stone where you set your own goals and you progress as a player in your own way. And AP is just like kind of a blanket. I think it was a good, like in a lot of ways, I think it was a solid attempt, but I kind of get why it didn't work and why maybe it doesn't come back.
It did come back though. That's the thing. I agree with what you're saying though. Like going and picking this, I remember getting tier tokens and going and saying, well, I've got good legs already, so I'm going to get the shoulders. So then I get a 2-piece, but it's like the idyllic set for right now, not necessarily the idyllic set end goal, but it works right now. But for me, AP from that respect only works if you don't need it. And if you're playing at sort of the top end of the game, you do need it. Unfortunately, you do need it. And without having the choice of saying, like right now, there's very little incentive to do a Mythic plus 10, like unless you're into pushing keys. But there's very little incentive to do 2. Like a character, like there's no reason to do that, right? And when the AP was a thing, and of course legendaries, you could join in with your friends and you'd still get something worthwhile because the AP, for most of the expansion, I mean, it died off towards the end for sure. But for most of the expansion, was still building towards something. You know what I mean? It was still getting you closer to something else. And that made me, I know from my own perspective, I ran tons of Mythic Plus dungeons with friends, even though I didn't need them. And when I was doing viewer runs and things like that, I would go on my main character because I was still getting artifact power, which was helping my main character, despite the fact that heroic wouldn't give me any gear or normal wouldn't give me any gear. And having those incentives to do that, which we don't have in BFA, which is unfortunate. I
just really wish, like, even when I do look at the essences right now, like, I think back to legendaries and I think back to, I'm going to use Warlock as an example because I'm going to use Warlock and Demon Hunter for an example right now. When I thought about Warlock, because I was playing Warlock a lot at the time, I loved the idea of having a ring that was going to be really strong in execute. I love the idea of having Sacrilash for different moments so I could actually slow down my targets. I loved the idea of having so many of these different legendaries and you could see all the different areas where you wanted to use them, but obviously obtaining them was a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like obtaining them was definitely a problem. But also as a Warlock, it wasn't hard to think up different legendaries that you would have liked as well that could have maybe come out a little bit later in the expansion. And I just really wish that the legendary system was Safuz, like people like kind of crap talk Safuz a lot, but I feel like Safuz is awesome in certain scenarios.
Who the hell crap talks Safuz?
I feel like a lot of people.
Maybe. At first,
yeah,
first, okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Once something, and this is the problem that the developers have to deal with, that I always feel terrible for, is that once something has negative perception, it's so hard to shake it off. Like, people still will say that Elemental Shaman stinks right now for a while. Outside of people who are maybe watching the runs happen right now and watching what Elemental Shaman can do, will still say Elemental Shaman. Like, that is something that they will just have to deal with for a long time. It's really tough once the community decides on something to change the hive mind. But when you do look,
perception's a nightmare.
Oh, it's tough. It's really tough, and I would never want to have to deal with that. I think it's one of the hardest things that the game will have to deal with.
Yep.
And stop is like even look at everybody making fun of how I say Safuz, which is perfectly fine.
I think it's if you watch anime, because my anime friends also listen. The only people I've ever heard call that thing Sefus watch anime. I noticed it back in Legion. Is there anybody I know who
called me a weeb in front of everybody?
What were we talking about before the stream started?
Yo, Rich and I were breaking down the new Attack on Titan episode because it's awesome. All right.
Whereas anybody who doesn't watch anime just calls it Cephas.
I was trying, so after, when you were muted, when you were setting everything up, Bay, I was trying to compare different things in the Avengers Endgame movie to Naruto to preach. Yeah. And I was like, you saw Naruto, right? And he was like, no, I can't be bothered with that. I was like,
I'm not mocking you. I'm just saying there's a link there. Like, I don't know if there's an anime character in, I don't know, Weeby Goes to Hollywood or whatever. That's called seafood. Or
honestly, you need to look up some of the relationships between the Nine-Tailed Fox and Naruto.
I don't want to watch that.
No, just one YouTube video, and then we'll have a discussion about the Hulk and Bruce Banner, and I think we'll really have a good conversation about it. I'm very serious. I think it'll be.
We're going so far down the nerd rabbit hole right now. It's
But
we're on a talk show
anime, so we can talk about superhero movies.
So what I was gonna say about that legendary system, and why I think that it is a system that I think we could return to. The exciting things about the essences being deterministically acquirable could be applied to legendaries. Like, imagine if I'm just looking at uu'nat right now. Like, let's say uu'nat is, it's got tentacles. Let's say that it empowered your abilities with tentacles, right? A thematic thing that's attached to the boss. Once you bring down uu'nat, you get this legendary as X class, and they're scattered about the entire game, and you're getting new ones with new patches. I feel like that's something that's really exciting and enjoyable to go for. And one of the reasons I always go back to that legendary system is I wasn't playing Demon Hunter at the time. When Demon Hunter got announced, I was like, this doesn't look fun to me at all. I'm excited for the people that are excited about it, but it just doesn't really catch my eye. Usually, melee classes don't draw me in. I'm much more of a caster player. But the second that I saw people have the legendary helm, I forget what it's called now, the I-beam helm, the meme beam helm, the second that I saw people unlock that and run Mythic Plus with me, I was like, I really want to try Demon Hunter. This looks so awesome. Cool. Yeah, and I played Demon Hunter, and I got on Succubé, my Demon Hunter, every single day. She's my waifu. I got on Succubé every single day, and I grinded for that legendary because I wanted to be able to play that meme beam spec. The only way that experience could have been more enjoyable is if I knew exactly where that was and I could target it. I don't mind some level of randomness that like allows you to maybe unlock a legendary token or something like that being inside of the game, because I'm not going to lie, the excitement that did come along with that was good. The fulfillment just wasn't. The rewarding nature of setting a goal and being able to achieve it isn't as much there, but the excitement is there. I would love for a system like that to be back in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think more generally what you're saying here, and this is something we both touched on in private conversation, is what we were hoping for from the SS system as a whole, and a more general look at it is spec-based things. That's really what we were looking for. We were looking for spec-based things. Yeah, the new things are, some of them are okay, and they're, a little bit interesting. From my perspective, they're all right. They're not terrible, but as you can tell from the hype from the community, if you need any proof, look at the hype from the community about essences. None. There's nothing. There's nothing. I can tell you the hype when Cloak of Shadows was brought into the game, and people were like, "What are you doing to rogues? Immune to magic? Are you joking?" Like, just that. Or Icelands came into the game for Frost Mages, and I remember Googling videos. I was like, "What does this look like?" And it's like this guy shooting off icicles that was splitting and doing this. I'm like, that is insane. And they're doing guaranteed crits, you know? But look at the S system, just look at the community. It's not happening. But what you did say earlier is theme-based stuff around the raid was actually in the thing I was sending to Blizzard, because that's what flasks should be, in my opinion. That's what those things should be, is stuff that is entirely themed around the content that just comes out. And doing things like adding tentacles to your character while you're raiding the Crucible of Storms. And then when we go to different raids, you get Titanic power. Like Uldir, you would gain some sort of Titan power for flasking up and stuff. Because flasks and things like that are a totally dead system. Like they're so boring. If you look at even the power gain you gain from things like flasks, and I think they're buffing them soon because they're just so useless. And they're boring and dead. But theme-based stuff per raid, they could have a lot of fun with that. They could do funky animations. They could do all kinds of things. And they're only little power gains. It doesn't really matter. And making them more interesting that way. I think those two systems can be separate and still both really fun. So you're talking about more class-based stuff like Raden's Meme Beam. You know, we look at legendaries and say, I could look at my Moonkin and I miss some of those legendaries, bro.
Well, even when you talk about flasks, though, go back to the time when consumables did feel a little bit more interesting, and it goes back to the same thing. It's a lot of choice. I feel like choice is one of the things that has gone by the wayside, because even when I look at potions and I think of potions being interesting, it comes down to, like, when's the last time it's not that long ago that I thought potions were interesting. You can go back to Janna, for example. That investment of having to use Sky Step instead of being able to use a DPS potion in certain, like, that is something that's cool. You see it in mythic dungeons when people need to use invis potions. I think that having choice in any of those moments is what makes something feel more powerful than it is.
I would have flasks for outdoor content. That are cheap. I would have flasks for each raid. I would have flasks that I would have a variety of flasks that you can use in mythic dungeons.
I go back to wizard oils and spell stones, right?
All sorts of things. Like what is best for this scenario, and that makes them interesting, makes them cheaper. Because all they've done recently is tried to make them interesting by making them super expensive, which is not that interesting. I've got to be honest, because we all need them. So you've just made it a burden. Are we trying to turn more people away from raiding? Is that the plan? Because I don't think that's going to work. Why not make them cheap, make them variable, make them do all kinds of different things, as long as they're not OP. You know, they even if you can break it down to bricks and bones and say it's a 2% power gain or 1% power gain, doesn't matter. Just make them funky animations, make them fit the area you're in. Cool. And then let's have spec-based stuff like you're talking about. Comparing it to Legos is the most obvious way of relating to it, but spec-based stuff, which is hopefully what 9.0 is, I'll be honest. Because like we talked about the Band-Aid fix, 8.2 is a soft reset. Bay is totally correct there. That is what they're doing, because when this testing system comes in, I don't think anybody's really prepared for exactly how squashed the rest of the game is. All the game you know right now is going to just be splattered, including our friend uu'nat here, because every character in the game, literally everybody, is going to become so much more powerful. It's just like that. Just like in a Thanos style, boop, you're now mega powerful.
I can't imagine that, like, that I'm looking over here at Kana's pull right now, and all the warlocks they've got going on here. Right, what's like the DPS is like 28k ish across top to bottom, like sustained. That's
it's hard to say with
50K.
It's hard to say because, like you mentioned, very importantly, Bay, like you've brought up several times, the idea of we really don't know what the balancing is going to ultimately look like. But on PTR, on every single spec, I was able to pull around that 50k mark without too much of a problem using current Azurite gear that's in the game. Pretty much every single spec I was able to pull 50k. So I think that it will probably remain in that area. And actually, all of those that I did play on, I was playing with Vision of Perfection. That's what it's called, right? The cooldown one.
That was the cooldown one,
I think one thing that I do want to note with the cooldown one, which we may have even talked about on the show. I know I've definitely talked to Preach about it. Bay, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it to you.
These tank HP bars are giving me a heart attack. Honestly.
I know. But watching Mare's HP.
Sorry, Rich.
It's fine.
My soul, bro, because they're getting so low.
I actually I like watching all of the callouts that they're doing with /say as well is stressful as heck to watch.
It's insane because this is what's crazy about this fight. We need to get back to that point you were making, Rich, because it was totally true. It's just that the discipline of the healers right now, and I know they're playing discipline, the discipline of the healers in this phase to go, DPS, you are on your own. We are keeping the tanks up. And that's essentially what's happening. I think they've got Kona just kind of like throwing hots around and stuff, but the DPS are essentially on their own at this point. And I'm seeing Josh and I'm seeing the other healers regularly look at DPS on like 1%. You're not getting a heal. That is not happening. The tanks need to stay alive. It's as simple as that. You need to look after yourself, be with the Warlocks. They're going to heal themselves. Go and get your HP off them, because we're healing the tanks, and that's it pretty much. And unless they could do something like a big AoE burst heal, which the Disc Priest can do, other than that, the DPS are really on their own at this point, and it's terrifying. And it's a lot of discipline. If you've ever played a healer, not heal people who are on low health, that's not easy to do, because your entire muscle fibers and everything in your brain is saying, heal that guy, he's going to die, and they're not doing it. And it's just so painful to watch.
Yeah, you need to, with this fight, and I think it is something that we said as well, is build up a whole new lexicon, a whole new muscle memory. And we've been seeing them do that for 700 pulls, over 700 pulls. It's one of the hardest bosses that we've ever seen in the game, if not the hardest boss. I actually think this will go down as... I think when everything's all said and done, when WoW 2 is coming out, and we're saying what was the hardest boss, and what was the best boss, uu'nat is going to be in the conversation for both of them as of right now.
Yeah, I hope it's not lost to the annals of history because it's a side raid.
Yeah,
I hope it's not lost and forgotten, because it's not going to compare to Ashara or N'Zoth or any. You know, it's not got that name behind it. Nobody knows who uu'nat is. No one cares. And there's only very few people in the world who are going to see it at all.
Yep.
And well, at least outside of like heroic mode, right? And it might get lost that way, where no one really thinks about it anymore. It's not, just wait, just died.
and also, I mean, like, even the amount of, like, when I look in the chat right now and see everybody talking, like, I know a lot of your names. Like, you guys are a lot of the people that, you know, we see at every podcast, a lot of the people that we see inside of everybody's streams. Like, it's very much the core of the community. I feel like in a different way than when you do a full tier and it's like, okay, like everybody's watching. Like my mom watches everything. Hey mom, how you doing? Yeah, I see her in the chat right now. But my dad is watching, right? Like my dad doesn't usually watch. My dad isn't watching this tier, but my dad will watch 8.2.
My dad died. Thanks, Rich.
Are you Batman?
I like doing that. My dad loves that joke, even if he used to do it about his dad. You would have liked my dad. He's funny.
So
see,
the thing
look how
with
screwed up you are.
The thing with the essence is I just shit.
Yes.
Shit.
See, my dad would love this. If he was watching, he'd be like, yes.
Shit, man. I actually need to turn on the AC, man.
No one ever expects it. It's so good.
Of all of the curveballs thrown at me,
No, it's always there.
Oh man. My dog's got more poop in his mouth.
Got him.
Wait, that's not poop. That's a straw. This is why you should use paper. You should use paper straws. You should not use plastic straws. It's very dangerous to wildlife. Yeah, how did
as you were saying?
What were we talking about? What were we talking about?
We were talking about essences.
We were talking about essences.
I think we had moved on. I thought we were talking about something a little bit different before we jumped into the pool because it was exciting.
Yeah.
But right before that, we were talking about we're talking about the reset, and the thing that we were talking about with essences that I'm a little bit concerned about. I'm just like a little bit concerned about is when we look at visions of perfection. Oh yeah, people in chat are actually you guys are quick. Thank you. With visions of perfection, as much as it's really cool and it gives you that 30% increase, it gets you to that 50K mark for so many of these different specs with the current tuning that may change. I feel like it's one of those cocaine logic design decisions that can be very dangerous. That's one of the reasons that in game design it's called cocaine logic, because you look at those big buttons and you think about how satisfying it is to press them. And you can say Metamorphosis, for example, anything like that, that big button that you hit, and the moment that you hit it, you turn into Thor and you're smashing stuff. You're going dummy hard. And that moment feels really good. And if you ask any player what they want to do, they'd be like, oh, I want to be in it 24/7. I want 100% uptime on my biggest cooldown. But the thing is like, of course you can't have that. Because if you do have that, it's actually a you think you do, but you don't scenario. If you do, it ceases to feel good. The dramatic nature of pressing that button completely goes away, and that button becomes meaningless. And when you create for so many of these different cooldowns, the ability to actually have that much uptime, it's not exciting. It becomes the accepted power level. The procs become way less interesting, and you're actually taking the most dramatic and fun ability of all these classes and making it weak, making it something that is just expected. I think that can be a problem. I think for some specs, it does make them feel better. When I look at Demonology, for example, I actually do think Demonology feels a lot smoother. It feels a lot more rounded out in a lot of ways. But I think for some classes, it could be a problem in the long run, taking away that big damaging cooldown that maybe defines the spec. And it's a little bit of cocaine logic.
Yeah, a little bit. It's going to cause a lot of problems with bounds. But they have nerfed it, so I think the uptime's slightly less. But I still think, and I need to test it again, I don't know if Bay has, that you're still in your DPS cooldown more than you aren't. And that's when it becomes a problem. Like if you're actually becoming frustrated for not being under the effect of your DPS cooldown, and that's actually the rarity, depending on what effect they have. So I mean, you can look at some of them that actually make you cast faster, for example. It's like you're bloodlusted, right? So you're in that, say, even 60% of the time. Not being under that actually starts to feel really bad because you're spending the majority of your time under that effect. And that's when it becomes a problem. It also does become a problem with creating boss encounters because a lot of the encounters are designed around the fact that people will be saving cooldowns for this part, so we need to work into that. If people are always under the effect of their DPS cooldowns, or regularly even, then it's more difficult to decide when's a burn phase. When do we want the guys to actually try and push harder and harder here, because they're kind of just doing that all the time anyway, in a lot of cases. So that's when it can become a problem. Maybe I feel that way, but I know some people who've also looked at items where they're going to be under their DPS cooldown much more than they are now, and they're like, this is going to be awesome. In practice, I think that will fall away. I think that will be a diminishing, a rather short-term gain, especially because everybody's going to have it. And that's when it becomes a problem. It's like, oh, I just got this killer sword. Oh, wait, we all got one. And then it's just not that special anymore, right? You know, it instantly loses all its value. But I'm not saying they're all going to use the same essences or whatever. I think as a Band-Aid fix overall, it's not the best. But I kind of understand what they're saying is like, look, in 9.0, we're going to be doing some big class stuff. Hopefully. That's kind of the message we're receiving now.
Oh, yeah,
what we don't want to do right now, right, Bay, is we don't want to give you big class stuff right now because we're probably going to be dumping a lot of this stuff. And then we've got the problem of trying to keep stuff that we didn't really want here in the first place because we only put it in as a kind of Band-Aid fix. And now you guys really like this. And does that mean that we can't have really fun stuff because they don't want us to like it that much so they can get rid of it easily? And it's just like, oh my God, it's not a good situation for them to be in right now. Because
they in this case being Blizzard, saw what happened when they gave us legendaries and artifacts and the new abilities and the passives and the quality of life and the cast time reduction, all those kind of little things that you got in your artifact in Legion. And then that was all removed. And yes, we knew going into it, that is Legion's system. That is going to be the compartmentalized fun factor moment in Legion. Sure. Right? Each expansion of World of Warcraft, because we're in a theme park MMO, essentially, is that every expansion is a new theme park, and then you move on to the next theme park, right? And every theme park's going to have rides and live shows and concessions and whatever. That's why the core stays roughly the same. However, they have then realized that going completely cold turkey from giving you all this amazing stuff to all of a sudden almost all of it is pulled away outside of the few talents that you might still have and some of the baseline abilities. A few tiny things. And they're way less powerful than the original versions, right? They've noticed this. And the reason why we're probably not getting any, and I'll echo this with you too, the reason why we're not getting this, and this needs to like hopefully perforate itself out in the community in more ways, We're not getting crazy amounts of class changes. We're getting a couple of spec-oriented or class-oriented things in the Essence system, and in a way, it's kind of like break the game or turn it wide over, or kind of like bring all these potential crazy synergies that people can find out. And why there's no hype for it right now is because you don't know how good they are. That's intentional, and I agree, because 9.0, the next expansion, they're probably doing a whole new system. I mean, I still keep saying that the current talent system is dead and gone. This MOP system is over with. The new 9.0 system is going to be a completely new talent tree system, or whatever hybrid they want to put together that maybe combines all these past systems together. And giving us class changes now would be the same thing they did in Legion. Give us cool stuff, and then they're going to take it away again. They don't want to do that.
I think to jump off the example you said, I think it's really, really well put. And to go like a little bit further with that theme park example, because I think it is a good one. It's kind of like if you've ever been to Disney World and there's a lightning storm and all of a sudden you can't go on any of the rides. They're all shut down. If you have a beer, all of a sudden the theme park becomes manageable. Is that going to work forever? No, it's temporary. You want to have good rides, but as of right now, Blizzard's basically just like, yo, have a drink. Let's have a drink right now. Let's sit back. Let's make it enjoyable for the short term. Let's put a Band-Aid on it. And when we get to 9.0, the theme park's going to be absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to be a theme park that you do want to go to. Speaking of oh man, I don't even have a transition for this one. The raid's over. They just called the raid.
Yeah.
We had some 2%ers. We had some 4%ers. We had some 10. We had a lot of sub 10%ers today. But the boss has still not fallen. Do we get worried about other guilds being able to take this one down?
They look so
asleep.
down about this. I think they blew their chance with some of these, especially that 4%. I know they had a 2%.
Oh,
but the 4% was looking so much nicer. And I think someone blew up in the raid with the Star Auger mechanic. I forget the name, Resonance or whatever it was called. I think that's what happened, and they were dead on for crossing the line.
Limit kills it in the next 10 minutes. I don't know.
You are all about Limit right now. It's funny.
Oh my god, my dog's killing. Ow.
It would be the. I mean, the door's open. They know what needs to be done. The Limit Boys know what needs to be done. They're certainly capable of it.
It's execution right now. I think it goes without saying. No flame. I really do think that this. I'd be terrified of Pieces. Right? You don't know what Pieces is doing on stream, and I think one of the biggest comments that we've heard a lot of the times from Josh too. He just straight up says like, these are the guys that come out and they overperform play wise. They don't necessarily always. We don't always get to see it. But their execution is insane. On the day, they are some of the best players every single time. And you start to think, are they going to be able to string it together? Are they going to be able to find the pull? You can see Josh right now on his stream having a little bit of a breakdown. I'm actually going to... he's just playing a PP jam. I don't even think he has audio.
Yeah.
According to, I'm looking at Scribe right now, 668 wipes is what he's listing in his, and I'm assuming Scribe was in for everything.
Yeah, I thought I'd imagine so.
Yeah, 668, I believe that is on his very small font on his resolution, but I believe that's what it is. I mean, that's a tough decision. I mean,
also
some of us have been there, but go on, Mitch.
Sorry. I turned on the audio on Josh's stream really quick. That I wanted to hear some. I just heard him say. And we lose people every day, like really quickly. Like I just turned it on to hear what he's saying. Like we are getting into the area where these guys haven't necessarily planned to be going this long. We're on what, day 8?
Mm-hmm.
We're on show 8.
Yeah.
So how long did BOD actually take?
6 days.
Yeah, 6 days.
Wow.
Jaina took 4 of those days? 5?
Wow.
Did they reach Jaina day 1? I don't think they did. Day 2. I think they reached Jaina. Yeah, Jaina mid day 2, I believe they got.
I remember having like a really sad day of like a sad dinner with Derry and JB where we were like, shit, what's gonna happen? Like the raid went by really fast. Everybody thought that like Jaina was gonna be going down, and then like it looked bad for Method for a little bit, and everybody was just like, what's going on here? So I actually think it was day 2, like late day 2 or early day 3 that they got to Jaina.
Yeah, Jaina, I'm looking at the stats. So these kind of things, obviously there's a certain nitty gritty you can't get into, but if you go over to, let me bring this up on screen again for chat.
Yeah, Josh showed screenshot of pieces log, wipe at 0%. I just saw that as well.
Ooh, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can look at these. This is method.gg, and it's the raid history thread. So yeah, Jaina was 7 days, and apparently the timestamp was it came down to the last few hours after the US reset. So I guess it was 7 days for the overall, but that was roughly like 6-ish for EU, I suppose, because they went through the US reset when they got it. Yeah, just to put it in perspective. And we've obviously crested both resets completely for uu'nat. And this was just 2 bosses, not 9. And mostly just 1 boss. Because Cabal was done the first day.
This is a monster. I told you, it's a monster. An absolute beast.
Yeah. It's
such a shame because they now know that calling the raid when you know you can kill it, and certainly if you're in the race, is one of the toughest decisions you have to make sometimes, like as the raid leader, because the guys are obviously frustrated and tired. I mean, you can see that. I was just flicking through all the Method Team streams then, and I imagine they don't really want to come and talk to us, just they kind of want to go to bed.
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah, I would assume they kind of just want to go and rest up or whatever and hope that nobody kills it in the night, but it's so tough to get that call because you're like, it's over. That's it. We had our tries. Like that's our attempts. And you obviously have in your mind, somebody's probably going to kill it while we're asleep, which might not happen. Like there have been many occasions that hasn't happened, but the door's there now. And you kind of think, we should have done it then. We should have done it then. And it's painful.
Hippo 1973 in chat said method dragging out content better than Asmongold. That's why like a lot of people were like tweeting at me like your dreams coming true. Like I'm 100% like I love the idea of a really long raid race. Like I do have a lot of fun with it. Like I love getting to like jump on the computer every day and get to talk to everybody and actually be like, wow, when's this gonna happen? And talk about like get to reflect on everything. I joked around and said it was going to be, did I say like 2 months or something like that? And
8 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be 8 weeks. We're actually in the area where this could be a full 2 weeks. Like it could be a full 2 weeks, even with where we're at right now, or it could go down overnight. Meth could wake up tomorrow and get it. But just think about what this day looked like. Think about what this day looked like. Like so many sub 10% pulls, but they still feel far away. I think that they know that it's possible. And I think some people would still even argue before the nerfs came in that this boss was killable. They know that it's possible, but they can't quite do it. Is sleep going to be the answer? Is another 200 pulls going to be the answer? Because I actually do think in so many ways, this isn't a boss where you say, we need everything to come over on the pull side. We need that beautiful miracle pull. They don't. They need everybody to play flawlessly. It's on the players. It's not on the boss in any degree.
It's a mind game at this point, honestly, because like I said, you know they could do it. I'm just flicking through. Some of the guys look really depressed because like it feels like you've blown your chance, and they need to get over that shit right quick. And certainly in the morning when I'm not sure if they're even day raid now. Like I said, there's more and more players who can't make it. We know Sko couldn't make it. He had a trip planned. Nobody expected this to happen. That we would be in this situation.
I knew he was gone, but it was a trip
in Asia, I think. Yeah, he's on vacation. He's had a vacation booked for quite some time.
Oh wow!
So Sko's not there today. More players going to be lost as over the next few days who have had these 700 pulls of experience under their belt, and they're like, you're not there anymore. But the other guys are obviously capable of picking up where the other guys were left off. But they need to get their head back in the game and not be dwelling on that 2% of the 4%.
I actually thought the Sko gone thing was a meme.
Oh no, he's on vacation.
Yeah, okay. So the nice thing is, GINGI spoke to this yesterday when Bay and I got to do the show with all of them. GINGI basically was like, the big advantage that you do have, especially for some of the players that are coming in like post MDI, it's like, yeah, we're rotating in 2 or 3 new players that get to pull on the experience that everybody else had. On a 7.
I didn't know we had a 4th guest on the show today, Mike. It's Rich's dog.
Dude, he keeps trying to he's never like this, but it was rainy, so he didn't go for his normal walk. And he's finding power cords that aren't plugged into anything, but I'm waiting for him to find the power cord that is plugged into something. Stop it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to keep up with the chat a bunch of stuff just to confirm a couple of different things in case people aren't reading chat or you're listening to this or whatever. The SCO here, I'll even bring up. That's actually a funny tweet that Scott brought up on his Twitter. SCO is away at a pre-planned family vacation that was a big deal that was already planned for a long time. He is traveling to Thailand. It's his mom and dad's 60th birthdays. So, I mean, like,
happy birthday.
That's huge. That was already a pre-planned thing. Obviously, they didn't imagine the raid would take more than a reset. So, but I want to bring up this. Let me make sure I have the right region sitting up here. Just so we all have context. Actually, what I just said is completely false. SCO has been benched.
SCO's benched, takes dad to Thailand.
Yeah, completely benched.
That's a great picture. Oh,
no, it's a fantastic picture. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Just him. He's the only one benched.
Yeah. It's really good. It's really good. But other little things too is that the polls now on uu'nat have exceeded Kill Jaden, and yes, the first like 200 polls on Kill Jaden were very scuffed because the boss was literally bugged and abilities were like, we're gonna have it at the same time. But that was obviously a thing. But Kill Jaden did take almost this many, but uu'nat now has beaten that. So we are looking at the most pulled boss, at least from the method perspective in the race to world first across all of World of Warcraft right now with uu'nat.
And there ain't no reset gonna make it easier, boys.
No.
It's all down to Blizzard and whether or not they say there's enough's enough and we're gonna let it be killed, because it is in their hands almost. Do we want to open the floodgates or do we want to give them more time in it? We have seen them change it twice now.
Yeah.
As you said, Bay, we had the guys on. Even before the first change, they thought it was killable still. They definitely were like, yeah, it's doable. It's doable. And now we've seen 2 changes, still standing tall and proud with all his HP. And that's what he's got to say. Look at all my HP. And he's still standing tall and proud. And arguably, they were all all those changes made it easier.
I know everybody's getting really excited for the Sonic movie and also for Detective Pikachu, but I don't know if you guys knew about Detective Josh. On his stream right now, he's attempting to figure out if the screenshot of the 0% wipe is actually real or not. And like I was like just looking over his stream while we're discussing everything, and he's got over all of the elements and everything. He's taking pictures of the screenshot, running it through all of his high tech, he's got paint open right now. Like, this guy's basically trying to figure out whether or not pieces actually had a 0% wipe. Because it also said that it was a phase 5 wipe. Now, I don't know how this proves anything. What's going on our screen? You know, this is actually a better movie than Detective Pikachu already. Detective Josh is a tier 1 movie.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much if I would pay for that detective service.
Yeah, this is like the private detective that you hire to see if your significant other is up to any shenanigans.
Look, looking through, it looks like it's more the ramblings of madmen who've been looking at a boss for so many polls and so many hours, longer than like historically. Yeah, it's time for everybody to go to sleep and call it a day, and re-energize for whenever they can get back into the action.
Josh,
that would definitely be the game plan. How disappointing for the boys, though. How disappointing to be looking down the face of this boss, knowing can be done. Knowing in your heart that, this team is capable of doing this. There's no more comps we could throw at it. There's nothing else we can throw at this. We've seen everything this boss is capable of. And we became, that close and then having to stop. And you can see the effect that has on the guys. Like, straight away, we can see that happening. And that's why it will come down to a mental game now. And hopefully, it can go one of 2 ways. One, like we said at the very start, we can't forget this. The guys, none of the guilds expected this to be like this, right? It's been an absolute. We had holidays booked, like we've seen there. We had guys at the MDI. The players weren't playing the A-list rosters from the start. They kind of expected something to be stomped in a day, and that was something that was said to me by the guys repeatedly. Is that it'll be done in a day, right? There's no big deal here. Now we're 8 days later. We're ragged. The hair of all the guys is everywhere. They're stressed out. They're frustrated, and if they do lose, which is entirely possible now because it's going to be a while till they're back inside there, that might give them the kick for Rise of Ashara that the guys haven't had for a while. You know what I mean? Where
I think this is the tier you want that kick, though, in a lot of ways. But then
it's a good place to get it.
It's so weird because it's kind of not now. Like it is. Like I still do think it's probably the best place that you could have the kick, but also at the same time, don't you want to be the guild that actually got down the hardest boss that's challenging nothing but skill, that has nothing to do with gear, has nothing to do with research? Like, this is the best boss we've ever seen. If I could pick one boss to have world first on, this would be it, right? I think hands down, this would be the one that I would pick, just based off of what we've seen. It's
a Raiders boss. This is the thing.
Exactly.
Like, I think historically, most people aren't going to remember this fight because it's not got that big name attached to it. More people will remember Arthas and remember Kill Jaden and things like that. But this, you can already see in threads in years' time where they'll be talking about, it was like 600 pulls, but there was all this not true information about the setup and all these kinds of things.
Right.
But from a Raiders perspective, who understands what's going on here, what we're looking at, and what we've been watching for the last 8 days, this is a Raiders boss. Because, like I said, are they even going to farm it? I mean, I'd be really on the fence until it was heavily nerfed that they're going to bother farming this thing. But they're here for the challenge. They're not here for the loot. Not here for anything like that. They're here because this thing is amazing for Raiders. And that's why I think you're right, Rich. I think this kill might mean more than a lot of other kills that we see because they're aware of exactly the hill they had to climb to get there. Which probably, if you're into the competitive side and you're not, loot's a non-thing, which it isn't for many of these guys, it's overcoming that super difficult challenge of being proud and have that badge on your lapel, right? We were there first and we managed to do it. And that's what they'll be chasing. That's the hunger that they've got right now. And hopefully they can keep it. Hopefully they can keep it.
Hey, I think in so many ways, like Preach was saying, this is mythic raiding boiled down to its purest form. Like, this is what it means to be a mythic raider. This is what it means to mythic race in so many different ways. I know that the events are new and we're still getting used to them. And a lot of the discussions are going to be around different resets, when people got to start, how many pulls, like all of this stuff, and the character progression slowly becoming the thing that makes the kill inevitable. And that not being here, this is just the best race in so many different ways that we have seen.
The weird part about this one, too, and it sort of goes back and echoes what we brought up earlier in the show, is that it's not necessarily like it's the best in this situation because the boss isn't styled like Kill Jaden. Because we didn't know what was happening with Kill Jaden during that, because we didn't there wasn't streams at that point, right? So when we finally saw the kill video, it was like, this fight looks easy. It's different when if you ever actually worked on Mythic Kill Jaden, anywhere around that time frame and how ridiculous that fight was. Because it wasn't challenging to, yes, you reacting to the RNG, but it was just annoying. Well, I'm looking at everything here, and I was talking to Kana earlier in the pre-show setup and even in his chat a little bit. There are some fine-tuned things I have all these questions about with this fight that we won't get answered until we can talk to any of the Method guys on the show, which may not be today, maybe tomorrow. We'll let you guys know, is that they are doing very, very min-maxy minutiae. Like, there are moments where they're only dotting certain ads, or only certain characters are doing certain things to certain ads to time out their HP. So they're all down to below the death touch window at a certain time on their fight in their chain of operations, right? There's certain, obviously, who is interrupting at this point in time after you move here. They're trying to script all of this out, essentially. The boss is scripted in a way. And to do a fight like this, you are making your own dance, your own play, your own theater presentation, your own script for your team. And that's why uu'nat is interesting to watch, because it's that difficult. And it really isn't just like, there's an ability that happens 15 times, you mess it up once, you're dead. So
yeah, I think that's the best way to describe that fight. Yeah, man, you look at those soaks, it's just like, yeah, it's not even that hard, right? Like it's something that of course the players are able to do, and a lot of the times when you saw the way that the different overlaps were working and everything, it was like, yeah, of course these guys can handle it. Here, looking at what they've constructed, you talk about the red light green light system that they had to actually create.
That's all. Yeah,
you talk about the way that these portals are being laid down, the way that they decided to switch to the warlocks. Like, this is a fucking opera. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is so incredible to watch.
I mean, even now we're looking at the guys being sad, but all the way up until they had to call the raid, which is obviously like when the sledgehammer hits you in the chest, they were laughing and joking all the way.
Mhm.
Like they were still very happy to be in there, which seems unbelievable unless you've been in there or you feel this way about overcoming these challenges. Certainly, World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that you could be there for 700 pulls for 8 days back to back, and you'd still have a smile on your face about being there. But this is kind of what we play for. This is why you'll have those guys farming islands for hours and hours and hours and doing world quests and collector turtle things, which is so far away from what's actually interesting to them in the game, over and over again on multiple characters, paying for multiple accounts so they can multi-box it to make it easy for themselves, doing all this garbage stuff that we all feel and don't like because of this little bit here, this 8-day period, or even sometimes 4 or 5 days to get this part of it. That's what's important. It's all about this. And when you're presented with this feast, like you say, like you call it an opera, something that is tailor designed for you, which this fight is. It's tailor designed for raiders of this caliber, not just Method, all the other guys who've managed to defeat Restless Cabal. Those guys it's tailor made for you. You got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy it. You've got to really take this opportunity because, as I said at the top of the show, chances of this happening again are so small, really small. They would have to go out of their way to make this particular situation with this particular set of bosses happen again, that it's really unlikely that we're going to see something like uu'nat at least until probably late next expansion. Something along those lines.
That's actually the weird part. Blizzard is getting how much information internally for their raid team with just this one-off with ability combinations and the numbers tuning and how finely tuned they can make something right now that is this difficult, right? What are they going to do now when Palace of Azara comes out? Because we saw, Battle of Azara-Lore. No, I'm just saying, Battle of Azara-Lore had like Mechatork when he finally got to him, right? 7th boss. He's like, all right, fun mechanic. Honestly, that was mostly what that fight was premiering, was the fun mechanic with the robots, but pretty challenging. But for the top guilds, it was like 20 or so pulls, what Max was saying yesterday. Stormwall, horrible disappointment from tuning because you could just cheese the ever-living crap out of that boss fight, so it was less than 50 pulls easy, right, for the top guilds, if even another 20 or 30 based on what Max was saying yesterday. That was unfortunate. And then Jaina, huge jump, right? And they were like, okay. So they took that level with Jaina and moved it right forward. So now we wonder, because we always keep seeing this sort of, I bring up the Siege of Orgrimmar problem back in the day. If you were ever part of the show, and I have the world first shows from way back in Siege of Orgrimmar. Don't watch it, they're horrible and cringy. I mean, or go watch it, it's fine. It's the internet nowadays. But in that bot, it was, 14 encounters in Siege of Orgrimmar, but like 10 of them were crap. You just steamrolled through 10 bosses like right in a row. And that's the weird part where I wonder where Blizzard wants to teeter-totter. They're like gift bosses versus like the curve and then the difficult ones. Because when we're going to see 8 bosses coming up soon in Azara's Eternal Palace, do we get 3 or 4 gift bosses and then brick wall? Or do we get just a handful? Where does this new style of, if they can tune something this well, will that start earlier in a raid tier? Do we start seeing...
I don't think it'll happen at all. I really don't. I don't think it'll happen at all. I think you're looking around Jaina at best, because this fight exists in a vacuum. That's my stance on it. This exists in a total vacuum, given the limited amount of people globally that can even see this boss, right? That can even see it. Because even if you were capable of putting together 20 people who are pretty good, you still got to get through the Restless Cabal, which is no easy feat.
Right.
And that really challenges your ability to do a raid setup. Like, so even see uu'nat, you have to be in such a vacuum of the player base that it's extraordinary to see it in this setup right now. And when it comes to launching like a full raid tier or something along those lines, it's not in a vacuum. It's open to absolutely everybody. The balance, the difficulty of that is extraordinarily hard, because you can't balance or tune the fight like they've done here for 10 warlocks. Whereas this, they can. They can't do that because, it's not expected of any guild, let alone, certainly even a mythic guild that eventually clears everything. It's just not tuned for that. And you don't know who's going to get there at what time. And then you can't make it so you can class stack to the extreme. You really can't do that. But what we do know now, and I think we really have to appreciate this, Blizzard do know how to tune around that.
Oof,
They
yeah.
absolutely do. And they choose not to. Right?
So-
They've chosen not to because we now know, yeah, they can do that. If you want it to be tuned to the absolute min-max pinnacle, we can do that. We have the numbers. We just choose not to because it's not fair to everyone else.
So
And I think that's a good decision.
I feel like you may be one of the people who would know something like this, but also I would totally understand if you can't speak to it at all. So if you can't, if you do know the answer and you can't, that's totally fine. There were a lot of rumors when this tier did come out, with everybody basically saying BOD was created by one team. Then there was somebody who just was in charge of Crucible Storm and led that helm, designed it with a completely different design philosophy. He was just in charge of this tier. And then we have somebody else who is working on everything in 8.2, working on Ajara. Do you know if there is any merit to that? Like what happened? Who was potentially in charge of it?
I can tell you what I know because I
Okay.
wasn't told that it was private information by any means.
Okay.
So if it was, you should mention that. But I was told that Crucible was made by, or the raid design of Crucible was done by one guy, and it was somebody who did nothing at all in BOD. Like had no involvement at all there. Like his project was to go and do Crucible of Storms and tune it that way, and that was it. That's all the information I have. It came from a pretty reliable source, and I haven't been told I'm not allowed to discuss that. But that's what I've been told. Is that true? I don't know. Blizzard hasn't come and said, "Hey, that thing you saw on the show, that was true," because I think we talked about it on day one. But that's as far as I know. That is the correct information. Yeah.
I just like this guy's awesome. Like if it is true and this was one dude who really did head this up, like he is awesome. I think he did a lot of things really fantastically well and would love to see some of those philosophies put into the end bosses of tiers, right? And I do think that it's a really important thing to talk about is how was this designed? Because we like how this feels. We would like to see more of this. And encounter design was already one of the high points of this expansion in my mind.
Yeah, All Day was fine. Like, I mean, it's not got the most standout bosses ever, but overall, it's got some pretty cool things. Tuning's been a bit wonky. I think that's fair to say. Tuning's been a little bit all over the place, but the actual design of the fights, is there anything that stands out in my mind as being particularly bad? Like, Talok's super easy. Yeah, Fetid maybe. I mean, that walk, though. I mean, you've got to give points for that walk alone. That animation is fantastic. But if we look at, like, Talok, it's super trash easy fight, but it's cool. Going down the elevator and stuff is really cool. Like it's boring, like mechanically, but actually doing the fight, I think is fine. Mother the same. Mother's not an overly hard fight, but moving through the escape rooms and stuff is a cool, interesting idea to run with. Just was tuned badly. Like certainly for a mythic standpoint, it was tuned pretty badly. I even enjoyed Vectis. Fetid I could do without. I could say that. And Zool didn't work out correctly. The Mithrax had its problems, but Gahoon was fine, just not something worth farming. I just liked being. I think they did a good job overall. I love BOD, and I love the design of BOD.
Everybody coming over from Josh's host, I want to ask you, how's he doing?
Josh.
Yeah. We saw the detective stream. Yeah, we saw like a decent amount of him trying to piece everything together, and we saw a little bit of the MS Paint. We saw him try to piece together whether or not pieces did get that 0%. We're just worrying. It's a little bit salty. He's crying. Yeah, it's a tough thing.
Stream to stream is all salt, is what I'm saying. But understandably so. It's very hard when that decision's made to call the raid, and you know it can die. It's very hard. So as long as this doesn't die tomorrow or while they're asleep, if they can get their mind in gear, it's still theirs to take. It's absolutely still theirs to take.
I mean, does it go? I want to hear predictions from both of you right now. Does it go down while they're asleep? Do we think that someone's able to take it down? How long do you think? Because I know that I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I know we have a bunch of new people coming in right now. I went to sleep probably like 13 hours ago or something like that. I went to sleep at 6 a.m. my time, and Method had already had a crazy pull where it looked like they were going to get it down. And I was like, should I just not go to sleep? Should I keep watching? Are we going to go live with the show right after?
Yeah.
And then a full waking session. I slept and I've been awake. I've eaten meals and the boss is still not done, and Method is going to be done raiding for the night. Does it go down to another guild?
I don't know. I'll limit even raiding because I've seen some of their raiders in our chat right now. So are they raiding? What's the story? Like who is still raiding? Who has a chance? That's what I want to know. Who is still raiding? If nobody's raiding right now, then no is the answer. But, who's still going?
I don't think Limit is currently raiding, but I think they will be shortly.
Oh, the whole chat's in Limit. That's awesome.
People are literally going into Max's chat right now. I just went to Max's stream. People are like, "Hey, are you raiding? We need to know." He's literally at the login screen right now, just staring at a goblin. So, which is how I play WoW most of the time these days. When I do log in, I wonder if what Pieces is up to, if we could figure that out. I know that we saw Josh trying to detective it all together.
Scam. It's a scam picture.
Yeah.
It's scam.
Yeah,
Propaganda. Maybe not though, but scam.
What do you think, Bay?
Not to dismiss anything from the NA side of things, but we haven't seen anyone get that close within that region. So I think it honestly is between right now. It's between Method and Pieces, and scam or no scam on that photoshopped image. That's about.
Didn't a version hit 8%?
8%? I think they were. Sure. I know earlier they were at like 24. So they were definitely getting there. And again, you went over that earlier today with a version that they have a very different team composition. And the 8% is still, what is that? It's still 20 million health or something ridiculous. So that's still not, how close is 8% really? Right? That's the 8% could be 3 minutes. How much health
does this thing have?
Yeah,
a couple of raid bosses away.
Wow,
yeah, it's like
8%. You've not even started, mate.
The version hit 13 now. Being told 13 it's even further away. Because again, and this is like just my eternal like realism here. When a boss has that much health and there are that many mechanics going on that you have to deal with, and you're bouncing around to this, that, and thing. I was watching Fraggy's POV earlier today. And the amount of like not DPSing he was doing in the last phase because he could do the crown and immune for a little while and then run out and die and then get res and then come back in, like give his HP to someone else, then heal himself and go give HP to someone else and go back in. 8%, that's 2 or 3 minutes of fight, right? So really even a 2% is still probably a minute or so of combat because there's so much going on and the bleed out that's happening there too. So
it's so painful to watch each percent of this boss.
It's painful, but then it's like woo! It's because we didn't have that with Jaina. Rich and I were casting Jaina, and they just like break the 10% wall. SLT goes down. All right, second SLT goes down. So that was Potter, and that's the kill. It was there, right? When they got to it, it was done. Because we were surprised when it popped up anyway. You can go back and listen to the highlight when Rich and I were going back and forth. We were just like, oh, there it is. But this is different. This is going to be a like it's going to be that load bar that gets to 98% and then doesn't move, and it's still like animating that it's moving, and then it moves a little bit more. So
yeah, you can tell as soon as that Bloodlust runs, each and every percentage, especially when they're dealing with the ads as well, you can just see how much health this thing has, and it really makes it stand out when they're running dry. All the cooldowns have been used during Lust, so they're really down to their bare bones in terms of damage, and it's just trickling HP away to try and wither it down, which it's going to be similar to Cahoon, but so much harder, where those last few percent are going to be criminally stressful, because while that's happening, you've obviously got the tank health bars bouncing 50 times per percent as the guys try and keep them going and keep them from getting there, and seeing the boss go immune, which I believe is what happened at the 4% wipe, where the tanks died and the boss just went immune, and they were still plowing damage in, but it was just going to nowhere, absolutely going to nowhere. And you just feel so bad for them at the time that they're so close, but the boss is just refusing. He's standing tall. So have we got a view to look at?
I'm gonna give you another timestamp here, because I'm gonna go to like the last 4 minutes of this fight just to drive home how much of a slugfest this is roughly. Let me just give you a new timestamp here, because
I just want to say I think that there's a chance that not only do we not see any of the guilds get it down now while Method is asleep, but Method wakes up and then has another day of not getting it down. I think that is a real potential timeline that we live in. I think that there's a chance that this boss doesn't die for another 2 days.
Stop.
He's got the hand.
I personally want to see this be a 1,000 pull boss.
Rich,
personally.
What? Why? You sound like MMO champ. What are you talking about?
I like my job. I like my job. I like doing the Crucible Storms talk show. The second that this boss goes down, I'm unemployed. I would like for this to happen every day for the next 4 years. I love hanging out with you guys. I have a good time every day. I love seeing everybody in chat. I love
We could just call each other. We don't have to make the guild suffer for you.
We could just hang out.
Chit chat.
This is the only way I have friends is if uu'nat doesn't die.
He's not lying, actually. I wouldn't speak to you if we weren't here.
Yeah, man. I gotta make up excuses to talk to people. I'm like, yeah, we'll do Warcraft today.
Oh my gosh.
Man, this is the best thing that's happened to me. I love uu'nat so much. uu'nat's like the girlfriend I've never had.
So, Mike, I have the timestamp. We can sync this up. This is the, like, right by 51 million HP on the boss into the 2% pull earlier today. And this was so many hours ago. This was like 12 hours ago. This
was 12 hours ago, and they had a 4% about 5 hours ago, I think. 4 or 5 hours ago.
But let me,
I'll
slap this up when you're ready to go. Yeah, we'll just sync it up.
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
So this is where we're talking about. So are they in Lust right now? I'm just catching up with where we are. I think Lust has just run dry at this point. And what you're going to see is something, I don't know if Josh has spoke about it, but how much discipline we talked about earlier in the show, and you'll see it happening here. The tanks, look at the tank HP. Look what's happening to these tanks and feel bad for their durability. Josh is going to have to shift now, and this is how they've designed it, to basically focusing as much as possible just on the tanks. And they're now utilizing the warlocks and their self-healing to heal the guys who have the leech debuff so that they could just focus on the tanks. So you will see as we get closer and closer to the kill here, people getting down to stupidly low health and the healers not healing them because they're going to have to figure out some system to try and sort themselves out. That's why the raid comp is like this, just so they can cope with the sheer amount of tank damage and occasional hits that are going elsewhere. And I think Kona's probably throwing out some heals onto the raid, but the main focus is just got to keep these tanks alive, because if the boss does go immune, which as we have seen, if those ads get close to it, there's no chance of a kill. They have to keep the tanks up in this phase. It's getting so chaotic now with the amount of movement that needs to happen here. And this is why we said it was more like an opera, because it looks like chaos, but it's all controlled chaos. You can see how they're moving into small packs. Then they're going to bait things out, then move back in, and you'll see the raid shift in a really nice way, all in one sort of fluid motion in order to reach where they need to be at a very specific time. This is the corner where you'll generally see anybody who has to take the laser beam and take the damage from that will try to shift to this corner, while everybody else will move to somewhere else so they can deal with that. Oh, again, look at the healing. Look at where the shields are going from Josh. They're not going on anyone else. He's looking at Potter. He's thinking about it, a bit of a shield, but it's more a case of focus on that one group and focus on these tanks who are still being hammered into the ground, which is just, it's painful to watch because you kind of wish, we've been there if you've ever healed, where you just can't get the HP to go up. Nothing you do will make that happen. But perfectly in motion. We know how many players find it so difficult to play even at 50% of their potential while having to move around. It's a very difficult skill to have. The entire raid now has to do this. And you'll see Josh barely ever is able to stand still, and neither is anyone else in the raid, because they have this constant idea of having to group together to share the leech while spreading to deal with the resonance. You see the resonances coming out, dealing with this and moving around as an entire raid in order to dispel this debuff of themselves, moving back out to the edges. Then they're going to have to move back in. You can see how this operatic sort of ballet of play is taking place at exactly the same time, well, still needing to put out this crazy damage, and how good they are. And they're trying to keep it down to 2 leech buffs. As you can see, they're not wanting that to happen. They would rather keep everyone alive, but given the nature of it, it's better to probably let people go and die rather than keep leeching everybody down. Beautiful barrier there from Josh as he's looking at, he's got to try and keep this tank up. You can see just
basically a tank cooldown, yeah.
Yeah, he's using it just as a tank cooldown, just to try and keep these tanks up. And that's when the boss goes immune. As you can see, the damage, you can see the 50s and the 112s bouncing off the boss. And that's why that healing focus shifts away from the raid. It's almost better to have if your decision is between the tanks, if they're even at 50% or something like that, and a DPS is going to die, it's better to let that DPS die, because once that guy goes immune, one of those tanks dies and those ads get over to the boss. It doesn't matter what you're at. You're not going to do what you've seen other times during enrages, which is kiting the boss around, trying to buy that extra few seconds. This boss is designed, like we said, it's tailor-made to prevent the kind of extra little cheese that guilds can pull out and have pulled out in the past, in order to get the kills in those clutch moments. Everything about uu'nat is designed to prevent that happening. And that's how better? Make the boss immune if the tanks die. Like, as simple as that.
She's the best boss ever created. I actually,
she's the hardest. I don't know if she's the funnest. There's a big distinction between whether or not she's the funnest.
Also, I'm not sure if it's a she. Pretty sure it's just a giant squid monster.
You not sure?
Yeah, not sure.
Sorry. So somebody's sending me, and I'm not sure how much comfort. I might have access to pieces logs right now that says 681 wipes and an 8% wipe. I'm trying.
Learn some raid.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Thank you guys for sending me potentially fake doctored logs, but I'm gonna trust you. I'm gonna trust you, and I'm not gonna reveal my sources or the name. But potentially 681 wipes on their side. The question is though, and this was a very fun conversation that we had yesterday, is stylistically, how does pieces pull? Because we talk about so many of the different raid groups with so many of the different guilds. I call them raid groups. So many of the different guilds. Talk about being fried after watching this for so many days. I think that we see so many different guilds have different styles. When we talk about method, they'll do a pull and then they'll take a 6-hour break and they'll figure out what they want to do. Then they'll do another pull. Then they'll take a 4-hour break. Then Sko will fly over to Asia. He'll come back. They'll do another pull. Like, that is the style. They're very methodical, if you will, with their pulls. You look at Limit, though, they'll just chain pull. They'll just keep going. And they'll get more pulls in. So sometimes their pull count will be a little bit higher than Method's, but Method may have a slightly better quality to some of their pulls. And both of these strategies, as we heard from both people from Method and Limit, both have an upside. And you talk about where's the middle ground? What's the perfect area to be in? What's the perfect amount of discussion and VOD review? And what's the perfect amount of keep on pulling, keep on getting attempts?
Do you want to take it back?
I don't.
But
I think
you just put up the help me sign.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's mostly because of what you said that chat picked up on.
What?
I think every guild. Oh, you said that Method's strategy is very methodical.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
I didn't even realize. Thanks for catching that.
But I think every guild's gonna have a different way to pull, because you're gonna want to either test out and build muscle memory, or you're going to, the way that Scripe leads, and we've seen this firsthand with seeing how the cadence was in London, is very much that they pull, they test, and they write things down. They check VODs. Scripe uses a lot of recordings of his own POV to check timings and things. And then they'll basically make their own version of what they are doing to counteract what the boss is doing, right? The boss is on the A train and they're the B train, and they're trying to make sure that they cross all the right check marks all the way down the ray. And that's just sort of how they've always done it, which is also why historically, I guess, and maybe Mike would echo this depending on how you've learned and osmosed things in the community after you've not been in Method since a very while, is you look at a kill video of Method and you're like, yeah, that's neat, but we can't do what Method did in that kill video. So their strat doing that isn't going to be what we can do in our guild. So
yeah,
it's very
I would
different.
also just, yeah, I would describe, honestly, their style is methodical to the point that they have a very, very precise plan of what they want to happen, but they also play brutishly. And that's something that they've always done, which sometimes works heavily in their favor, but can also cause them problems. And we saw that kind of like on Mecha Talk, and we saw it a little bit at Restless Cabal as well, where it's a raid leadership style that my guild uses, which is they like to have a plan. This is what should happen. The details, though, are on the players. Like, the details are very much, we expect the guild to be talking to each other. So we talked earlier about we can't see the really intricate stuff, even with all these points of view, that the guys are doing to get this done, because most of it is being done between the players themselves. So we want this to happen, we need this to die there. How that happens is decided between the players. Get in there, start throwing and smashing your face into it until you figure it out what's going to happen. And there are a lot of guilds like that who don't really like to assign too much, because one, they have confidence their players are good enough to not only get the job done, but muddle through any problems that'll arise in the meantime and still get the job done. It's the same raid leadership style my guild has. Is I've suggested sometimes can we assign some things? No, we're not assigning anything.
Oh,
this is what needs to happen. Make it happen. This is on you. You know, go and sort it out. Communicate between each other, And it's a very fun style, but it can also work against you sometimes when you're doing very technical plays, is that you're bruting it and kind of feeling it off each other, what you're supposed to be doing right now, what's the best way of handling these situations. And that doesn't always work out. And it can lead to a lot of individual random deaths sometimes because it's not so pre-planned that, you know, every step is sorted. And I think that works against it at Restless Cabal, but I think it's working in their favor on this fight. Because this fight does need some adaptation. This fight is way more scripted, but it also requires a lot of adaptation on the fly between players to work out what's best, and it comes down to a hell of a lot more individual skill. And it also requires that brute force approach where you need to be hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering, while simultaneously not everything's set in stone. So you might see some raid leaders and raid styles which are like, everybody on blue now, everyone on orange, everyone here. And sometimes that's needed, but if you can get away with not doing that, a lot of raid leaders prefer that. It's like, okay, don't be in the stuff is a command that, you know, someone might put out, and they'll organize it themselves. Spread for residence. Instead of everybody having a pre-raid spot, you just say spread, and you trust the guys to deal with that. Right. Even if there's a big tentacle about to slam half the floor, even if there's, you know, storms, there's all this stuff going on where a lot of players are like, tell me where to stand. And if you're using the more brute force style, you're like, no, I'm not telling you where to stand.
Well, you can see a lot of that too with the way that their weak ores are actually set up. I mentioned like what you could see is going on in /say. That's going to be the weak ores that are pre-set up by them. And you can kind of see what are those callouts. There's a lot of information that's there that you can actually glean to how communications are working. It's probably, I don't know, maybe I would say it's like 15-20% of the communication even in weak ores. That's like a bullshit number that means absolutely nothing, kind of like all of these fake raid logs that are being sent to us right now. But it is a decent substantive amount of information that is being moved through those weak ores, and it is something that's really interesting to watch as you do look at those polls. But guys, we're starting to run out of time for tonight's show, and we're just in such an interesting place. I think all of us thought we were logging on and we were going
dead?
We thought the show was going to start, the boss was already going to be dead, or we thought that we were going to be watching it. Now everybody from Method is tucked in bed with dreams of uu'nat inside of their head. Will that boss finally be taken down tomorrow, or will their nightmares come true? And will it be taken down by pieces while they slumber?
Am I closing on that? We're
closing on the dreaming of a nut in our head.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I'm just.